and welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, the historical action and adventure podcast where we talk about all things historical, action, adventure, and anything else. My name is Matthew Harffy.
And my name is Justin Hill. Support us by leaving a review, subscribing to the podcast or whatever platform you're listening or watching on. And if you really want to help us out and get bonus content every month, consider signing up to Patreon.
Of course, the easiest and cheapest way to support us is to spread the word on social media and to anyone you may know, or your friends and family. You can drag them kicking and screaming to listen to the podcast, make them sit down in front of the YouTube video, or plug them into Spotify or something, or shout at your Alexa and get it to speak and to do the podcast. You can also, if you want to just leave us a tip, you don't want to sign up to Patreon or anything, but you love us so much that you'd like to give us some money to help run the thing, you can leave us a tip on Coffee, which is Koifi, but all the links, of course, are in the Linktree link, which is in the description, in the show notes. And that's it. So we've got an interesting guest coming on in a bit, but before she's in, how are you doing, Justin? You look like you've just crawled out from a cave.
Yeah, I've just I'm delivering tomorrow, but I had a 3-week deadline. It was a 2-week deadline for a novel I'm delivering, and I got an extra week. And I think about going to the tunnel. You know, it's very in the last. This is kind of the last draft, and the last draft is quite intense because everything is up to quite high standard. And so you're really trying to get everything up to publishable quality and beyond in the last couple of weeks. And so it was very intense. I finished about 4 o'clock this afternoon, went for a walk, and the daylight just seemed so bright. I'd not seen it for a while. So yeah, I'm a bit kind of stir crazy.
Okay, so you're going to be you're fully engaged and ready for this podcast episode. That's great.
Yeah, this is
Your
probably
brain
more,
hasn't turned to mush completely then.
yeah, it's more socializing than I've done for a while. But the kids are back at school this week, so that is great. You know, they're old enough now, they're pretty self-contained, but just to have them out of the house is lovely.
Yeah, it gives you a bit of peace. So I'm glad you finished the edits. You think it all went well then? You're happy with it?
Yeah, very happy with it. I think it's really good.
Good. Good. Is this a Justin D. Hill novel?
It is, it's a
Yeah.
Justin D. Hill novel,
Okay.
so I can say nothing about it.
Well, you can't say anything about the title or what it's about or anything, but you can tell us that it's a
I'm
novel that you've done
very
and that you're happy
pleased.
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all good. I'm sure the Black Library would be happy to hear you say that you're very happy with what you've written, which is always
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, it's I'm looking forward to seeing their feedback. It might have one kind of, but
Yeah.
for the listeners, it might come back for a quick kind of tidy up of a few bits and pieces. But it's pretty much done now. So it'll be going off to proof editors, copy editors, desk editors, whatever they do, and then off to be printed.
Cool. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm.
And
I was going to say
where
I'm sort of in the editing process myself as well. Still
yeah.
carrying on with my Bane of Benicia, book 11, the Benicia Chronicles, and I'm about probably about a third of the way through. I finished the read through, and now I'm
Yeah.
about a third of the way through putting those comments that I marked up on the PDF into the actual digital manuscript, in Scrivener that I use. And so that's got a manual process, and lots of it is kind of where I've underlined things, just say like find a better word, synonym for this, or change the order of this. And certain bits I've said like, can you add a paragraph? Like today, it was a bit. I mentioned a character. I know basically I've replaced a character from a previous book, like a side character, a servant,
Mm.
and I thought I need to give a reason why. I haven't sort of said why, so I had to like write a little paragraph to explain how the previous one passed away and someone new has stepped into that role, to make it make sense and things like that. It's just filling all those little gaps, and so it's sort of structural edits and line edits and sort of just clean up. But yeah, it's going well,
You
and
pleased?
yeah. But it's I don't know. I always think everything I write is terrible until the stage when I read it. When it's finished, I sort of think, oh, it's okay. It's sort of passable. I think, yeah, I read it and it wasn't. It didn't make me want to kill myself. So that's a positive.
That's
I
good.
think that's good. Yeah. Oh, I had some other great news this week as well. So finally, they've announced the Spanish one of the Spanish festivals that I'm going to be speaking at in October.
Yeah.
which is a first for me. So doing like a mini book tour with 2 or 3 events in Spain. And so not only doing a book tour, but doing a book tour in a different country. So I've never done a book tour of any sort of type, really. So
And
having
you'll
a
be doing it in Spanish as well.
almost certainly, I'd imagine. I mean,
Yeah.
they know I speak Spanish, so I'm pretty sure they're gonna speak to me in Spanish, which is going to be very daunting because although I do speak good Spanish, when I was living, I'm very fluent in Spanish, but I have never spoken in public about writing, so my vocabulary is very much the day-to-day kind of Spanish of being out and about with your mates, going to the cinema or something, not sitting in front of 50 people in a book festival asking me questions about 8th century. So,
Research. And,
so it's going to be quite interesting
do you know the
trying
word
to
for cloaks?
yeah, well, exactly. It's going to be all that
Strange
sort
things
of
like that.
stuff. It's going to be sort of my vocabulary is going to be really lacking. So I've been listening to some podcasts, and the other day I watched a football, one of the Spanish Liga football matches, and I found it on a Spanish radio channel. Sort of turned the sound down on Disney Plus, but it was in English, and watched it in Spanish. So I'm just trying to sort of freshen up my Spanish before I go over
Yeah.
in Spain to Spain, and it's only a month away. So
Wow, that's so exciting.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, it's in October. I'm going to be in a place called Ubeda, and I'm going to be doing something in Madrid as well. But that's not been announced yet. There's something in Madrid, but I'm kind of waiting for them to do their announcements before announcing publicly these things. But
And I imagine that's a nice time to be in Spain.
yeah, it can be rainy, if you're unlucky.
Okay.
But if you're lucky, it's be very sort of nice, sort of autumnal but warm weather. So I think
And
the one in
which bit of Spain is it that you're?
So Ubeda is
Yeah.
down in the south of Spain,
Okay.
in Andalusia near Jaén, and of course Madrid is right in the slap bang in the middle of Spain. If you look at the Iberian Peninsula, it's like a square. It's right in the middle,
Yeah.
Madrid.
And why those places? I mean, Madrid, obviously, but why?
The publishers
Okay.
contacted me and said they said, well, the place in Ubeda is that they've got a historical novel
Okay.
festival or whatever. So it's called
Yeah.
a Certamen something or other of Ubeda. So it's all about the historical novels. So slot in quite perfectly. And I think the other
They,
one
s-
is
yeah,
they're doing something about Vikings or something. So they're kind of slotting me in there.
they seem quite interested in historical fiction. I presume because I think Shield Wall and Viking Fire were both translated into Spanish.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, it
I'm
does.
trying.
They do seem to be, yeah, and they seem to be really pushing my books at the moment. This is my second book that's coming out in October, but they bought a few of them, so I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that, and hopefully there'll be a long, sort of fun journey with them because they know I speak Spanish. I think they're more interested in kind of getting me over there.
Yeah. Selling
Yeah.
selling the books. Yeah, I think actually my Spanish publishers do more work than my UK publishers for publicity.
Well, this definitely feels like the case here. I think the British publishers um, they do some stuff online, and obviously they're pushing the books into shops and stuff, as much as they can, I guess.
Hmm.
But yeah, it definitely feels like in terms of festivals and things like that, they haven't done of late. They've not done much.
Hmm. Is there more of a literary culture in Spain, do you think, or
Um, Well, I think people read books more in the UK. I think the
really?
per capita, at least they used to when I looked years ago at the sort of the
Hmm.
data. But I think there's probably more. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to say, but I think maybe there's more sort of respect for the novel as an art form and
Yeah.
writing. I think there's more of it. People look up to kind of how the literary world as if like it's something elevated, maybe more in Spanish culture.
Hmm.
They might think, oh, this is a proper art form, whereas I think it's become very easily consumable in Britain and an English speaking world. Maybe it's more like, I don't know, more of a diluted
I think so.
thing. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
difficult to explain exactly what I mean, but
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I can
yeah.
see that.
But anyway, I'm looking forward to it, and that should be good. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. There's something else actually for the podcast of interest that I don't know if I mentioned in the last episode, but I've finished my bits of the collaborative novella that I'm working on
Hmm.
with Stephen Mackay. And he contacted me just yesterday to say that he's now working on his final bits. So this week, he's hoping to have that finalized. And then we'll sort of do a read through. And of course, we've told our producers on the Patreon that they could be beta readers if they request, if they sort of show an interest, and a few of them have. I think all of them probably have, actually. So if anyone's listening to this, you're still in time. If you want to sign up as a producer, we'll let you read our collaborative novella for free early, and you can give us some feedback on it if you're quick at reading. And it's going to be published probably in November. So and you get all the other perks, of course. For you get all the bonus episodes, and you get us to give you a shout out, and you get a Christmas, not Christmas, a birthday message from us on your birthday every year as well, if you're a producer.
Yeah, well, that would make a great Christmas present, wouldn't it?
Well, it would. This collaborative novella, I mean, definitely. It's going to be amazing. I've got the title now, but I won't announce it yet until Stephen's ready to announce it as well. And as we've talked about, I think probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks, when we've sort of got it ready, you can get us on a Zoom call, and we can have a chat about it. You can interview us and ask us a little bit about it for the bonus episode probably for October. I'm
looking forward to reading it.
Brilliant. Yeah, we'll give it to you. You can be a beta reader too. You can tell us what you think about it.
Oh my God.
Or not, don't tell us. If you say you're too busy to read it, you say, I've been very busy, I haven't been able to read it. We'll just get the message. That'll be fine.
Yeah.
That's always a good one. So, I'm going to mention something else. Have you watched, I know you've been very busy, have you watched any of King and Conqueror, the new TV series about the build up to the Battle of Hastings and the Battle of Hastings?
I have not. I generally think I thought it was going to be crap, and I think most impressions are that it's crap.
Yes, I don't know what to say really. I did ask on Patreon if people wanted us to do a review, and a few people said yes, and a few people on social media said yes, we should do a review of it. Got quite a few comments on Facebook, and it would be great, but I know it's quite a big time commitment to set aside 8 hours to watch it.
Of crap.
Of something that's maybe not as high caliber as you would like. I think at some point in the future, if we're struggling to think of something to review or to do, it would definitely be worth looking at, because it's interesting to see what makes it into mainstream in terms of what is projected about the Battle of Hastings and the build-up of the Battle of Hastings, because that's what people are seeing, right? So even though all the historical nerds like us are going, oh, it's all wrong, 95% or 99% of the population are just going to watch it and think that's what it was. And those clothes people wore. And
one of the other reasons is I'm kind of close to starting my Hastings novel, so I don't really want to kind of.
This is not going to taint your. It's not going to taint your viewpoint. That's like saying that I don't know if you're George Lucas writing Star Wars or something, and he says, "Oh, I don't want to watch." I don't know. That's a bad analogy. I'm trying to think something. It's like J.R.R. Tolkien saying, "I don't want to watch." I don't know what's like a really bad fantasy film. I don't want to read
Sword in the Stone. Yeah. But it's kind of like James Duncan we had a couple of weeks ago. He's like, I didn't read your Howard Hardrada because I just didn't want my head of doing my own.
Yeah, but that's his excuse, isn't it? But that's the excuse not to read your stuff. But also that's different because it's the same medium. So he's trying. He doesn't want to read it, and he knows yours is going to be good, whether he agrees with your portrayal or not. He knows it's going to be well written. So that's going to, by necessity, I think if you read, I think it's impossible not to be influenced by. You're also influenced by stuff you watch as well, I'm sure, but less so for the writing. I think if it clearly doesn't fit with what your view is. Although saying that, when I was writing Dark Frontier, I did watch loads of westerns and things, but I took what I wanted from them, I think. So I think if I watched a very subpar western, I wouldn't go, oh yes, I'm gonna now write and write it in that style.
Yeah, I just and I don't trust the BBC with drama. I don't think they're putting out good stuff.
I have to say your instincts are pretty good, and I wouldn't have watched it unless it was very much sort of I only watched the first 2 episodes, and that was a week ago. It was very very poor.
Mm.
But I
Very,
think
very
it's
poor.
very, very poor, very badly written,
Yeah.
reasonably acted, very just bad on lots of levels. But that will
Mm.
have to wait for another day because I see our guest is in the waiting room. By the way, just before I finish that, I'll just say that before we let her in, um, if you want to, if anyone listening to this wants to go and find our Facebook page from the link tree, you can find it and look. Actually, I don't know if it's on our joint one. No, it's on my one, my Facebook page, my author Facebook page. I put in a thing about King and Conqueror, and it has hundreds of comments. So if people want to see other people's views on it, you can go and have a look there. It's got more comments than any post I've ever put on Facebook.
That's amazing because my
It's
editor always
crazy.
says that there's no interest in the Battle of Hastings.
It's
And
got hundreds and hundreds. You should go and look at it. It's amazing the amount
yeah.
of anger people have about it as well. They're getting
Oh,
really
good.
irate about it, like about how bad it is, like
Yeah.
things and sort of being angry about it. Anyway, but
Well,
we've
let's
got,
get her on.
yeah, let's get her on, and we'll talk a bit more later on.
Dr. Joanne Ball is a Roman and battlefield archaeologist at the University of Liverpool. She has excavated at the Varus battlefield and published widely on Roman warfare and the Teutoburg, both in academic work and for general audiences. A regular voice in ancient history, podcasts and magazines, she brings fresh insight into how Rome fought and lost its battles. Her latest book, Tacfarinas, An African Rebel Against Rome, explores the remarkable story of resistance to Roman power in North Africa. We talked to Joanne about her previous book, so if you're interested in Arminius and the Teutoburg disaster, check out that episode after you've listened to this one. Welcome back to Rock, Paper, Swords, Dr. Joanne Ball.
That's great. Thank you all both so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Hello. Is it okay to call you Joe?
Yeah, Joe is absolutely fine.
Right. Okay. Well,
I won't keep thinking I'm in trouble then if you don't call me Joanne.
Introduced you as Dr. Joanne Ball, but then after that it's Joe. I realized that in our emails I'd actually called you Joe Bell a few times, and I think this is because in your X Twitter profile you've got an E, so it's Dr. J something. There's an E somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's
and
my
it kind of
name.
confused me, and it confused me. I think I somehow thought your surname was Bell, and then I suddenly realized my mistake. But anyway, I went back and edited all the names of all the Zoom links and stuff.
Yeah, it's no worry. It's remarkable how having such a short surname, people get it wrong much more than you would. It's like one of the first words that we ever learned to write, and yet people get it wrong all the time. It's amazing.
Yeah, you're like me. Very few letters to learn when the kids were learning to write. They could get to their name quite quickly with Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. So, right. Well, as we said in the introduction, as Justin said, we've had you on to talk about your previous book. We're now talking about your new book about this character called Tacfarinas or however we pronounce his name. So first off, what makes Tacfarinas a worthy subject for a whole book? As I've never heard of him before, and he's quite, as far as I'm aware, a lesser known figure of Roman history. So why have a whole book written about this guy?
He is absolutely a much less well-known figure from Roman history, despite he's from the early imperial period, the reign of Tiberius, so an era where we really think of that it's very well documented, and in comparison to other Roman periods, it is. But there are certain elements of it that just really haven't been taken up too well. And I will confess that partly this book came a little bit from a pub discussion when I was talking to a few colleagues about what I was going to follow up my Varus book with. And I said, well, maybe Tacfarinas. I've been tired, kicking around that idea. And somebody said, you can't write a book about him. There's not enough in the record to write a book about him. So partly it's stubbornness as well that has led to this book being produced. But he's a fascinating character. So he is a Roman soldier, a Roman auxiliary soldier, turned deserter. He fled the Roman army for reasons that we don't know, became a bandit and sort of roamed around northwest Africa, causing all sorts of problems for the Romans, until eventually they decide, right, we've had enough. This guy's causing too much chaos. He's attacking too many of our settlements. And they sent in an army against him, led by the proconsul of the province of Africa, Proconsularis, and they thought, we'll be able to give him a pretty swift kicking, send in the Roman army, show him a bit of our Roman steel, and, he'll disappear back into the desert where he belongs. And, they do this. They give him a right seeing to in the battle, but he just keeps coming back. And for nearly 8 years, the Romans do everything they can to try and get rid of this problem in Northwest Africa, and Tacfarinas just constantly eludes them. They defeat him, he comes back. They take measures against him, he goes around them. In the end, the Romans end up having to fight as a guerrilla army themselves to finally put down this kind of rebellion, which threatens to upend Roman power in Northwest Africa entirely. And so he just seemed like a fascinating figure and an obvious person to write a book about and give some much needed credit.
Now, when I think of Roman North Africa, I think of Carthage immediately. So in the reign of Tiberius, help someone like me who doesn't really know this period that well. It's later than the destruction of Carthage, and it's kind of much further west towards what is now modern Morocco.
Yeah, so the kind of geographical setting, we're talking about Morocco, Algeria, a bit of Tunisia as well. He roves around and covers quite a lot of this area, and probably down into the Saharan fringe as well, and including places like the Aures Mountains as well. And yeah, in terms of time period, this is where Roman Northwest Africa is considered quite a pacified place. It's past the terrible wars of the Republican era, where we saw the Punic Wars tearing the area apart, and as you say, Carthage being destroyed. But by this point, the region is really picking itself back up. It's becoming a breadbasket for the Roman Empire. It's incredibly productive. There are a lot of Roman landowners really exploiting the resources in this region. But it's somewhere that has been relatively on the back burner in terms of kind of political development. The Romans were quite happy to have a presence there and to put a province there. And there was fighting there during sort of the civil wars at the end of the late Roman Republic. But nobody had really sort of taken Africa in hand and started to properly provincialize it. And that's something that we see starting to happen in the period just before Tacfarinas, and is probably part of the reason that he gets so much support for his rebellion, because things are very much changing for Africa in this period.
Is he a Berber then, in terms of kind of ethnicity? Is he a local to the area?
So he's definitely a local to the area. Part of the problem that we have in answering this question is that the Romans are stunningly unspecific when they're talking about the ethnicity or the identity of sort of provincial citizens or provincial inhabitants. So they say that the Romans also say that he's a Numidian, so that he's from the area of the kingdom of Numidia, which has been part of the Roman Empire since the days of Julius Caesar. But the caveat with that is that the Romans tend to say anybody is Numidian if they come from Northwest Africa and they don't live in a city. Yeah. So he could actually he doesn't have to sort of be from that geographic area. He's identified also with the Musalami tribe in the region, who are a tribal people in the area of Numidia, but he's not identified as being born of them. He says that he becomes their chieftain. So whether he comes from them or not isn't entirely clear. But it is very obvious he is an indigenous to Northwest Africa. That's where he comes from. He probably is a cavalryman, and that's how he ends up kind of serving in the Roman army as a indigenous warrior who's forced to serve Rome in his younger sort of teenage and young adulthood.
Because they were famous cavalrymen, weren't they? Didn't Hannibal went to attack Rome with the Numidian cavalry, and the Romans had very poor cavalry.
Absolutely, the Numidian cavalry are absolutely fantastic. And I mean, when Rome faces them, when Hannibal sort of puts them into the field against them, the Romans are terrified by them. They're overawed by them. They are not a match for them at all. And one of the big diplomatic challenges that faced Rome in the kind of later stages of the Second Punic War is trying to convince some of the Carthaginian allies to actually defect to Rome so that they could use their cavalry against Hannibal. And as soon as they do, Hannibal actually, that's when the tide kind of partly turns against him, is when Rome starts using Numidian cavalry against him.
So we're pointing out here that the Numidians had this amazing cavalry, and from what I read in your book, Tacfarinas, although he was, do we know what rank he left the army from? He was an auxiliary soldier, but my question was going to come to anyway, is that he had these amazing tactics, right? He managed to fight incredibly well against the Romans, in his homeland and in that whole area. So tactically, was he better? Did he have special techniques and strategies and things? I mean, what set him aside, and what kept him alive and his revolt going for so long?
Yeah, so we don't know what kind of rank he got to in the auxiliary. We don't even know how long he served in it, to be honest. But it's clear that he served for long enough to get a really good handle on how the Romans operate in the field, and particularly what their weaknesses were in kind of desert settings and in mountainous settings, and in the kind of topography that Northwest Africa kind of presented. And so because of that, I strongly think that he was in the army for quite a while. I'd say at least a decade, maybe 15 or even 20 years, and that he becomes an officer of some level, that he is responsible for training men when he's in the Roman army, because we see that's exactly what he does as soon as he leaves, and when he deserts from the Roman army and he's putting together this kind of banditry force. We're told by Tacitus, the Roman historian, that he starts to recruit men, sort of disaffected young warriors from Northwest Africa, and that they come to him because they want to serve in his war band. And he sorts them. He goes through them. He assesses their potential, and the men who have the best potential as soldiers, he puts them aside, and he says, "I'm going to train you as a special elite unit, akin to a Roman legion. So I'm going to train you in Roman discipline and Roman battlefield tactics. I'm going to equip you like Romans, and we are essentially going to serve as our own legion, with Tacfarinas as kind of the legionary legate in that circumstance." So I think that very clearly indicates that he served for quite a significant period of time, and he is a very capable soldier and trainer in his own right, because it doesn't make sense otherwise that he's able to do this. If he's some snotty 22-year-old recruit that's got no experience and doesn't know what he's doing, how is he possibly going to kind of persuade all these men that he can make them into a legion and actually do it and deploy it against the Romans very effectively?
So you've talked about how the Romans underplayed him. Is that purely kind of Roman prejudice, Roman kind of, and it's interesting about Tacitus as well, writing about him, because I know a little about Tacitus, but I think that he liked to talk about the enemies of Rome because he felt Rome had kind of declined and was destroying kind of better cultures around the world. You know much better than me, so.
But yeah, I mean, Rome, they do seriously underestimate him at the time that the conflict kind of breaks out. And potentially, we don't know exactly when he started to be a problem for Rome. We know that the war started in AD 17, but Tacfarinas had potentially been active for several years before this, gradually building up an army, gradually causing problems. I mean, that's again indicated by the fact that he's got a fully fledged legion ready to go into the field against Rome in AD 17. He's obviously been active for quite a while. But Rome, yeah, they really just don't expect much of him. And I think that very much that is what you've said of that, Rome in general underestimates its barbarian enemies and doesn't think that, these people could possibly stand up against Roman discipline, something which they should really learn over time. But it's not quite as simple as that, but it takes them. obviously a while to learn this. But there seems to be an especial prejudice with Tacfarinas that relates to him being from Northwest Africa. So Rome does have an especial bias against either nomadic or semi-nomadic peoples in this period. They very much present them as being, kind of a halfway step between animals and actual human beings, as represented by the Romans. And so there is very much this feeling that comes through both in Tacitus's writing about Tacfarinas and also the Roman actions that he records, that just very much indicates that they just think, well, we'll turn up, we'll give him a thrashing on the field. He's not going to be able to do anything against us, and then he's going to run away like the barbarian coward that he is. And this just very much comes through. And in the early stages of writing about him as well, Tacitus doesn't even refer to him as an enemy commander or a leader. He just refers to him as a bandit, as a latrones, a very sort of derogatory term. He doesn't recognize him at all as a military leader. That only changes later on in the conflict.
So you've talked about how there are very few sources and that your friends thought this was an impossible book to write. So how do you do the impossible? How did you piece together what information there is in order to sketch his life out?
So there is a lot, technically Tacitus is our only sort of surviving source that gives any kind of narrative of this conflict. It is missing from other accounts looking at this period, which some have argued means that Tacfarinas isn't really a particularly significant conflict. I completely disagree. I just think that it is one that over time, as kind of Rome's relationship with Northwest Africa changes, it's not an incident in which they can make the same kind of historical points as Tacitus does. And so it sort of gets marginalized because it doesn't tell the kind of story that Rome wants it to. But so, I mean, to sort of approach this, it's in some ways a great time period to look at something like Roman rebellion when you consider the early imperial period, because we have a lot of these kinds of rebellions breaking out. We have them in Illyricum in AD 6 to 9 with the Great Illyrian Revolt. We have the actions of Arminius in Germany between AD 9 and AD 17. And then even going a little bit later, we have people like Boudicca and things. So it was also a case of sort of interrogating all of those different rebellions as well, to look at the patterns in how the rebels are sort of acting against Rome, how Rome is responding, and then sort of being able to flesh out the details about Tacfarinas using that kind of comparative material. And then looking at the archaeology and stuff of Africa as well. So when I started writing, I had no idea how complex the archaeology was in this region. And, these peoples who are often just dismissed as these semi-nomadic indigenous peoples, they've got cities, they've got complicated trade networks, they've got all sorts of contacts with the Romans, and this was just never included in any of the kind of overviews that mentioned Tacfarinas. They just went, oh, he's a Numidian, he's fled from the army, caused some problems for Rome, and everybody was happy to leave it at that. But when I started to look into the story, it was just fascinating, and I just couldn't stop.
Is there any archaeological evidence of like cities being burnt or damaged during this time, or population centers being unpopulated, anything like that?
Unfortunately, there isn't, but that is partly a reflection of one, nobody has really been able to go and look for it because of kind of the modern political situation. We've only really been looking for that kind of archaeology in the last 20 to 30 years, and it's not really been possible. It's also not been something that's massively of interest to the archaeological and political authorities over in that region. So unfortunately, there isn't. There are a few scattered archaeological references to the conflict, but they're from inscriptions rather than from actual sites, unfortunately. I mean, I would love one day, let's hope there is peace across the world, and I can go and excavate all of these sites in Algeria and Morocco and things. But
yeah, so exciting. No. And, with the kind of the hoard of things that have been found up on the Hadrian's Wall, there could be something similar, from a Roman camp in Algeria.
Oh, it would be amazing to see. I mean, I'm sure that, unless it's been destroyed, the archaeology in theory should be there. But it's just a case of sort of the situation being suitable to go and find it. And at the moment, that's quite difficult.
Yeah. You mentioned that they really underestimated Tacfarinas, and in fact, other rebellions in other places as well, the Romans. But obviously, in the end, they had to go and keep going and eventually, get rid of him. And eventually you have to send loads and loads of troops, deploy lots and lots of troops. So how big of a problem was Tacfarinas, and how did he become so much of a problem that eventually they had to send whole legions to get rid of him? What was going on?
Yeah, so the first time they try and get rid of him, as I said, they think he can just be swept away fairly easily. There is a proconsul of Africa called Marcus Furius Camillus. He's just out there as sort of his 1 year kind of gap year in his political career, not expecting any military conflict. He defeats Tacfarinas on the battlefield. They give him a triumph. They think, great, job is done. Tacfarinas comes back the next year. There's another proconsul in place by this point called Lucius Apronius. And this is where we start to see Tacfarinas causing a problem. He starts to realize that attacking the Romans in pitched battle, that his troops aren't ready for that yet. If you put them on a pitched battlefield, they're just going to get rolled over again. And so what he starts doing is he starts attacking small Roman military outposts. And he does so effectively that there's one outpost that he attacks it, and the Roman soldiers, they sally out of the installation, the fort, to come and face Tacfarinas' troops. They take one look at them and then they run away. So an entire cohort flees from the battlefield, runs back into the camp, and they say, "We're not fighting him." It's considered such a collapse of discipline that Lucius Apronius, he decimates the cohort. So he revives this kind of archaic punishment where 1 in 10 of the Roman soldiers in the affected unit are beaten or stoned to death by their fellow soldiers. This is a punishment that has been on the statute book since the Romans don't even know where the origins of it came, but it's only used in very rare circumstances. And really, actually, the only times we see it being used in any kind of concentration is during the civil wars. So the civil wars of the late Roman Republic. And Lucius Apronius deciding that this punishment is appropriate for a Roman cohort against a foreign enemy is incredibly exceptional. And it shows that he's obviously concerned already that Tacfarinas is going to inspire this great amount of fear in these Roman troops, and that they're just going to keep running away unless he does something to kind of make them realize that they might die either way. And so you might as well try facing him. And so he just continues with that. He raids towns, he raids cities, he raids Roman military installations. He just captures so much of their gold, so much agricultural input. He starts to disrupt farming. It really destabilizes the region because all of the Roman interests there are just being completely undermined. And every sort of resource that they get from the land, he takes it away from them. And so this is partly why they sort of decide they really have to take action against him, because he's just rampant in this region and he won't play fair. He won't meet them on the battlefield. Every time he attacks the Roman army on the march, and then as soon as they start to fight back, he runs off into the desert and they can't follow him there. And so he's just got this real handle on the Roman weaknesses in the field, which, coming from his background as a Roman soldier, he knows what they can't do.
It's really interesting because you look at, I don't know a huge amount about the history of Rome and the different revolutions, but think with some of them, like I'm thinking of Boudica and maybe Arminius as well, it's quite clear that their end game is to destroy the Roman enemy and, hopefully get rid of them, get them out of their country. Doesn't sound like that was Tacfarinas's goal. And I wonder if maybe they kept on calling him Latrones and a bandit is because maybe he was much more interested in just accruing wealth and disrupting the flow of money and power and rather than actually just getting rid. It doesn't sound like his end game was to get rid of the Romans out of North Africa. What do you think?
I think originally, I think that's spot on. I think that he is almost a gangster or something in his region. I don't think he's got a huge amount of political, drive at that point. I mean, there are a lot of things going on in the region at the time that are sort of representing political disruption. So the Romans are starting to survey land in the region. There are rumblings that they're going to start introducing taxes. They start building roads across traditional kind of pastoral lands and things. So there are political problems going on that probably account for quite a lot of his recruits. But Tacfarinas originally, yes, I think there's ground to sort of see him as very much an opportunist. But this begins to change, and it changes sort of about halfway through the war against Rome. So around about sort of AD 2021. And we see this because he sends an embassy to Tiberius. So not to the proconsul of Africa, not to, the emperor's staff, but to the emperor specifically. And he says, if you want this war to finish, I want land. I want land for me and my men. I want it in perpetuity. I want a promise that Rome will never conquer it. I want amnesty. I want that you will just leave us alone in this land. And so this is the point where we start to see that he maybe does have political ambitions. And he says to Tiberius, unless you give this to me, I will never end the war. The war will never end unless I get the territory I want.
It sounds a little bit like he's saying, I want a two-state solution, which, talking about the area that he's talking about, you can see how, the history repeats itself, right?
It does. And I mean, Tiberius takes this suggestion terribly. He sort of rages about this. He sort of goes, who is this, this bandit to try and present himself as an equal to me? How dare he suggest this? There are greater leaders than him. He specifically mentions Spartacus, and he says, we never dealt with Spartacus when he was threatening Rome's security. Spartacus never dared ask me for territory, but Tacfarinas, this, barbarian, comes and tries to negotiate as an equal. And he flies into a rage. And sort of this is when he really decides that this upstart has to be put down in the region. So he doubles the military garrison. He sends another legion to the region along with a large number of auxiliaries to really try and put this insurrection down. But this is where we see a shift in Tacitus. From this point on, he does start to refer to Tacfarinas as a military commander. He refers to him as a dux. So we do see that maybe making that gesture and sort of having a political aim rather than just a wealth accrual has made at least some difference in his perception by Rome, because they do now start to recognize him as more than just a bandit, but they think he's a bandit as well still.
So it might have actually worked against him really in the long term if he just kept just sort of robbing people and trying to accrue more wealth and power. He might have lasted longer.
Yeah, I mean, who knew? If you really, really anger the Emperor of Rome, it doesn't end up going that well for you. Who could have predicted?
I suppose he threw the dice. I mean, I suppose he might have. It sounds to me like he might have been in a position where he thought, I'm never going to win this because Rome is much more powerful. If I've made myself a nuisance for several years, and killed hundreds and hundreds of Romans and stolen all their money. If I ask them now for land, maybe they'll do it. Obviously he gambled and thought maybe this is a way out of this mess, because he must have realized he got himself into a mess that he was never really going to get out of.
Yeah, and I mean, he sees at this time, so this is around the period, this is just a couple of years after Rome has abandoned the territories east of the Rhine as a result of Arminius's actions.
Yeah.
So he knows that Rome is vulnerable, that they are willing to give up territory if it makes kind of political and military sense. And, Arminius in Germany, the Romans ultimately, they defeat him in war. They don't kill him though. They don't pursue him, and it's not necessary for them to have him dead. And so maybe Tacfarinas is sort of taking inspiration from that and going, well, it worked in Germany, why not here?
Do you see, it's very interesting because Arminius and Tacfarinas are both kind of Romanized locals then rebelling against Rome. What similarities do you see between the two figures and their stories?
Yeah, I mean, they are fascinating. The connections sort of between them are very noticeable when you start to look into it. That yes, we don't know if Tacfarinas comes from the elite himself, but there's a high likelihood that he does. But yeah, that they both join the Roman army, so they're approaching their conflicts against Rome as insiders. And both, you can very much see that they use this knowledge of the field operation of the Romans and its weaknesses in conflict, in warfare, and in battle specifically, that they use that to their advantage because they can predict what the Romans are going to do. They know if I put them in this situation, I know what the protocol is. And so what I can do then is take measures to make those kind of countermeasures that the Romans are going to employ. I can render those ineffective by kind of the measures that I'm going to put in place. And so I think it's really fascinating to sort of compare these two figures. And I mean, in the end, Rome sort of does use some of the lessons that it has learned from fighting against Arminius. I think those really inform how they approach this conflict with Tacfarinas in the later stages, and they very much sort of borrow those tactics that they've used in Germany to Africa.
Oh, that's really interesting. That answers the question that one of our followers on Twitter, on X, asked. The Pacienus, I don't know how you pronounce their name, but yeah, they said they wanted to know about the comparison between Tacfarinas and Arminius, and they also said did the Varian disaster play into the thinking of Tiberius and his generals? And it sounds like you're saying they very much did, and that they used similar tactics, or they learned from the mistakes they'd made fighting similar sort of guerrilla warfare.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Rome really sort of gets some very sharp lessons in Germany, and sort of when they're doing their sort of putative campaigns against Arminius 6 years later under Germanicus, he employs a certain number of sort of strategies in the field, everything from taking almost no baggage train to having smaller, faster units that's kind of are almost rapid response units in the field, rather than these big lumbering legions with these long baggage trains and things. And that's the kind of army that Rome has initially in Northwest Africa. It has the traditional legion that moves very slowly, and this just is a gift to Tacfarinas when they start to take this conflict more seriously after he's sent this angering embassy to Tiberius. They very much shift into the same kind of patterns that the Romans had used in Germany. So they have much smaller units that move much quicker. They found, rather than having sort of one big fort, they'll have 10 smaller ones in lots of strategically significant locations, so they can start to control the landscape a little bit more. So yeah, they're very much learning these lessons from Germany. And I mean, it's interesting to speculate. I kind of think that had Varus survived the Arminius's attack in the Teutoburg, that he might well have been the person who was sent to go and put down this insurrection by Tacfarinas, because he would have been facing exactly the same kind of circumstances. Or maybe Germanicus, if he hadn't been killed or died in the middle of it.
Yeah, I think I was just reading I Claudius over the summer, and Germanicus is the brother of Claudius. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And very interesting. And what little I know of Tacitus, I think he's the one who says that the Romans create a wasteland and call it peace.
Yes, he does. Yeah, in response to it's a Caledonian chieftain who's making a big rousing battle speech before facing the Romans up in Scotland. So it gives us a nice perspective on what the Romans thought that the natives thought about their presence.
Yeah,
and that sounds very Warhammer 40k. Interested.
Yeah, I write for Warhammer as well, so I love these grim, dark kind of glimpses of the past. And interestingly, after Tacfarinas' defeat, there's relative stability under Rome. Have they kind of crushed resistance, or was his rebellion kind of aberration? What's your sense on that?
So, I mean, after Tacfarinas, yes, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of conflict that's sort of documented in the record. It does seem to be that this is maybe the last stand of people who are trying to resist this, inevitable Roman onslaught on their lands. I mean, Tacfarinas isn't the first attempt to cause problems for Rome in this region. There has been periodic conflict going on for about 30 years before Tacfarinas emerges onto the scene. We don't know any specifics about it, but we hear reference to people being granted a triumph, so triumphal honours, a victory parade for their victories in Northwest Africa. And so we don't know what they've done. We just have this record that there is this triumph, but there are quite strict guidelines for being given a triumph. You have to have killed at least 5,000 of the enemy in battle. So we're looking at, some fairly significant military action going on in this region. And there is a war in the region between AD 3 and AD 6, where, again, the indigenous people have sort of risen up against Rome in sort of a quasi-rebellion, resistance to conquest. Again, we don't know a huge amount of detail about this, but we know that this is sort of raging in the years just before Tacfarinas appears on the scene. He may even, depending on how long he's been in the Roman army, he may even have fought in that conflict, putting down his fellow countrymen against, on the behalf of Rome. And then maybe that's something that sort of contributes to his decision to desert a couple of years later. So it is a very turbulent region at this period. But once Rome sort of gets rid of Tacfarinas, starts to be more conscious of security in the region, we do start to see this kind of dying down from the 20s onwards.
While you were writing this book, it sounds so. Your friends in the pub said to you, "There's no way you can write a book about Tacfarinas. There's not enough information." Obviously, you've unearthed a lot of information. You've managed to write a whole book about it, and it's gripping. And obviously, his character is really an exciting, interesting character to look at. But while writing and researching the book, was there any? Can you think of one specific piece of information that you found that really surprised you or moved you in some way that you hadn't expected?
There were a couple of things. I mean, one of the things that I found most intriguing, it isn't related directly to his story, but is the fact that in the dialect of Arabic that they use in the region, that Tacfarinas is still a word that's used, and it's used to mean a military commander and bandit. Wow. And so his name
may have just been
or his story was so well known in the region that when a new language came into the region, that his story was so significant that it got imported into this new language, and still, his folk memory is still preserved.
I suppose that's one option. I suppose the other option is that from the original language, I mean, I don't know how much the language has evolved over time, but it could be that Tacfarinas just meant bandit. And they ended up becoming his name by the Romans because they just took the name that people were calling him and said, "Oh, that's that gangster," and they said, "Oh, gangster."
Yes, so, that's it. If you call your kid, troublemaker, what are you expecting? But yeah, so I found it really fascinating, sort of how much of a folk hero he sort of is in that region, and sort of how in subsequent history, the stories about his resistance against Rome, that his methods were employed by Algerian resistors against the French in the 19th century. Wow. And that the French then adopted Roman tactics to defeat their enemies, and they based their strategy on what Rome had done against Tacfarinas. And I found that really fascinating to sort of know that he does echo kind of down the ages. That and how much he annoyed Tiberius. I really, really liked him when he annoyed Tiberius that much.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And is he still remembered? And what is the kind of the North African view of their time under the Roman legionaries? Obviously, it's pre the Islamic conquest. So I have no idea how they kind of view that part of history. You were saying there's very little political interest. What's their take?
Yeah, so Tacfarinas himself, he's growing in importance. So, during this kind of French colonial period, a lot of this was repressed because it sort of represented a kind of nationalist history that wasn't particularly desired by the political class at the time. Since then, he's sort of been rediscovered. So Tacfarinas, along with some other indigenous leaders from that area, so people like Juba as well, Juba the First, Juba the Second, and Jugurtha, who led a war against Rome in the 2nd century BC. There's been a revival in interest in these individuals, so in a desire to sort of identify architecture that would be associated with them, even tombs that might be theirs. In almost all cases, they're almost certainly not. They're from roughly the right kind of period, but there's this romantic desire to sort of find something tangible connected with these people in the modern landscape. They've become popular names for children since sort of the 1950s, 1960s. You find kids called, Jugurtha, called Tacfarinas. They're a big part of the school curriculum in places like Algeria and Tunisia as part of their kind of national history. And there's even a musician from Algeria, from the region most associated with Tacfarinas, who took Tacfarinas as his stage name. So, he's quite an iconic figure in that region. He's just one that, for some reason, hasn't leapt into the popular imagination elsewhere.
Yet.
When people read your book, obviously that will be it. I mean, it'll be movies made. It will all be happening now. But I was thinking, we talk about all these things that you've managed to discover about Tacfarinas, and we're coming towards the end of our talk to you, coming out towards the end of the time we've got. But I was thinking you've unearthed lots of information. There's obviously still lots of gaps. If you could actually travel through time and meet Tacfarinas just for 5-10 minutes and sit down and speak with him, what would the one question that you'd like to ask him, and sort of to understand from him, to actually get it, directly from the horse's mouth, as it were, and answer one of those imponderable questions that you might have?
I mean, that's a very difficult thing, because I can already think of about 20 things that I actually want to ask him. I think that the main one would have to be, why did you do this? Why did you put your life on the line, the lives of your allies, of your family? What was it about this? Was it something that life under Rome was just so unbearable that you did this, or did you have no idea it was going to be this at the start, and you just wanted a bit of cash, and it seemed like a good idea at the time? Rome seemed vulnerable, and it gradually, did it get out of hand? Did you know that was this always what you were aiming for, or did you suddenly turn around and go, oh my God, I'm leading a rebel army, what's happening? So yeah, I think I'd want to know.
It seems ripe for sort of historical fiction, that kind of, because it's that quandary of like the narrative of why, what caused this, and you can sort of imagine all different scenarios flying around in my head, thinking, obviously we've got the story like Boudica, but she is the revolt because there's some horrible rape of a family member, and she's trying to, she wants revenge, and it's all these things. So those sort of things you can understand, and obviously it could be something like that. Something horrible could have happened to him, and he might have decided, that's it, I've had enough. Or it could be he was a criminal and got, and was going to get court-martialed and perhaps crucified or something. He decided to run away before he got caught and fought against it. Or he could have just been, like you say, it all got out of hand, and he just was like a petty crook, and it just got one thing led to another. But who knows, right? We'll never know. But
but if somebody from Hollywood, wants to make the movie and have me as a historical consultant, I'll be happy to help.
And then ignore everything that you say to them, and then you have to watch the film with your hands over your eyes, going, "Oh my God."
That's it, when you end up with sort of Tom Holland playing Tacfarinas or something, and maybe
wearing leopard skins, and it will all be completely different, and you'd be like, going, "Oh my God, what
Wakanda."
Is
this? That wouldn't be ideal. I think the history is a bit grittier than that, but again, not in the kind of over-exaggerated Hollywood way of that everything that is Roman is shiny and clean and white, and everything that's kind of Northwest African is dirty and hot and animal prints. I think there would be a better way to deal with it, especially because Tacfarinas' army, as far as we know, they will look like a Roman legion. I can't see Hollywood liking that too much, that you will have two armies coming onto the battlefield and they'll both look like Romans.
They'd all have to have different shaped shields and no helmets, that's for sure, different colored clothes. But maybe one day we'll see the movie made of it. So what's next? So you've been in the pub, and your friends have goaded you into writing about Tacfarinas. You've written about Arminius and Varus and before. So what's next?
So the next one is again sticking with the theme of resistance to Rome. And yet again, this one was largely pounded out in the pub, but people do believe that this one can actually be done. So the next one is looking at Roman Dacia and looking at the King Decebalus and his resistance to Rome in both the reigns of Domitian and Trajan. So that's
brilliant.
kind of the next project.
That's very, very interesting.
Yeah, there's Trajan's column, which is
exactly
covered with graphic evidence.
This is it. You get decapitated heads and Roman soldiers carrying them by their hair in their heads to present them to Trajan. And you get lots of excuses to go to Rome for research purposes.
Ooh,
so
I'm so jealous.
I'm jealous, but that does sound amazing. And I have to say that I'm just about to embark on starting a new novel, and it's going to be set in Rome in the time of just after Trajan, when Trajan's column has already been erected, and Trajan's column may or may not be part of the storyline. So, very interesting.
Oh, well, I'm happy. If there's ever anything I can do to help with that, just let me know.
Oh, thank you. I could be sending a draft to you, and I'll be the one getting the red ink. You'll be reading it with your hands over your face, going, what the hell is this rubbish this guy's written? So, yes, maybe in a year's time or 6 or 7 months' time or something, I'll be asking you some questions. But that'll be brilliant. So, well, best of luck for the new book. Do you know when that's going to be written and when it's going to be ready and out?
So hopefully that should be out in 2027. So roughly about 2 years' time from now.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we look forward to that, and we'll almost certainly get you back on to talk about that. And I saw, before you go, I did see in the new one, about Tacfarinas, that you actually gave a little shout out to the podcast in the acknowledgement. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Always, it was such a great thing to be on, and a lot of people sort of mentioned having listened to it. So it was a great pleasure, and I was really happy to be on it and for your support.
Oh, excellent. Well, thanks very much, and we look forward to seeing the next book. So thanks very much, and best of luck.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you. I forgot how much I enjoy Roman history. Not very interested in Roman novels, but Roman history is fascinating. And it was lovely to talk to Joe, and to have someone who's so knowledgeable. And I think archaeologists have quite an interesting take on history, because a lot of histories are being proven, a lot of written histories, which is one of the main sources that we've had, have been kind of proven to be inaccurate, or selling a narrative.
Very biased, very difficult to know how true they are to what was really happening.
And archaeologists are kind of one of those, kind of the forefront of actually finding physical evidence of things that did or didn't happen. So very interesting. Really
interesting. And so we said this when we interviewed her about the Teutoburg disaster and Varus, about taking these subjects. You as a writer of historical fiction, it really fires your imagination. You can sort of think, oh, this character Tacfarinas, obviously with the amount of research that she's done, she's in a perfect position now. If she wanted to write a compelling novel about him, she could really, I think, turn a very interesting story. All you've got to do is kind of just fill in. Well, I say all you got to do. You've got to fill in the gaps in the narrative, but try to understand the motivations behind. But you could, as a writer, as a creator, we could do that. If we were her. But we asked her about this last time, and she's not really interested in. I think she sort of said she'd sort of toyed with the idea and thought about it, but she's obviously, that's not the way her thought processes go. But she's very very erudite in the way she talks about it. She's very passionate and interesting and compelling to listen to. So I would think that she'd probably be quite good at telling stories, really.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's exactly one of those processes. My PhD was kind of all about this, of you take a historical figure for which there are kind of some sources, and you have to kind of work out how truthful they are, and then work out the person who then did those things or didn't do those things, and create a convincing story. And there seems so many gaps with the Tacfarinas story that it almost lends itself to a historical fiction.
Exactly, because I'm thinking about the stuff that I write. The easier fiction, the easier it is to write is the further back in history and the more gaps there are. Not the further back in history, because of course there's certain points in Roman history where they sort of, you know everything, from a written perspective, lots of stuff is known. But where there's huge gaps, like I'm writing about the 7th century British history, it's great because you get these sort of tentpole, there's a battle, the king was killed, but you don't really know why he was killed, you don't know where the battle was, you don't know what caused it. So it's complicated to try to work out all of that stuff and fill it in and make a compelling argument, but at the same time nobody can tell you you're wrong. As long as it makes sense and sort of all sort of hangs together, you can still be true to the time and true to the story. So yeah, this Tacfarinas character, I mean, if you know of some of these battles and some of the things that happen, you can seed those into the story.
Yeah, of course we have narrative brains. I mean, we're not computers, so when you give us these facts, we want our brains are like, whoa, I want to fill in the gaps. I want to know why and what, and she said I want to ask him why he did it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the first thing I was thinking as well. It's like, was he sounds like a gangster. It sounds to me like he was trying to get out of a bad situation at the end when he contacted Tiberius and said, look, just give me some land and I'll stop this.
I'll pay my tax and
just let me get out of here. But I'm guessing that he went about it in the wrong way, and but there was no way of getting out of it. I don't think Rome.
I think with Rome, and certainly with Tiberius, he was such a no, not a chance.
They weren't going to back down. I think that's not the way they worked, was it?
No.
Anyway, interesting. And this story that I'm going to write, this novel I'm going to write, it's at the moment it's just a twinkle in my eye, really. I've jotted down a few lines of ideas, but it's going to be much more the small picture with the bigger picture of Rome behind it. I'm not going to be trying to tell the story of hugely famous characters and wars and things like that. It's going to be in the city, but stuff happening, some skullduggery and things, but it's going to be a fictional story set within a truthful world, a real world.
So you're going to Rome and you'll be researching.
I'd like to
see the city, can't you? I mean, essentially.
Yeah, I've been to Rome before, but I haven't got any plans at the moment to go. But saying that, we had a trip booked for later in the year to go to Germany for a few days, just for a break. A bit of a random decision to go, but the return flight today has just been cancelled. So I'm now in a situation thinking I'm going to try and get my money back for that whole trip, perhaps, and maybe I can convince the wife that instead of that, maybe we go to Rome, as I prefer to do. But it's quite an interesting thing. Book this holiday, and suddenly it's like, oh, by the way, your return flight's been cancelled. It's like, oh, okay, so what? What does that mean? How does that?
We'll stay longer than we thought.
What do we do now? Just go there and just stay forever? Long weekend. You don't come back. Anyway, so that was a great episode. I think that's it for today, and we hope people that you've enjoyed it. And don't forget to leave a review and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're watching or listening. Thanks to all of our patrons, and a special shout out to our Patreon producers as ever. Adam Turner, Ben Mayer, Andy Maxwell, Ben Fox, Daryl Hare and George Johnson.
You can sign up on Patreon, support us from as little as £1 per month, or buy us a beer at the link tree in the show notes.
Until next time on Rock, Paper, Swords, it's goodbye from me, Matthew Harffy.
And it's goodbye from me, Justin Hill.
And remember, whatever action and adventure you have going on in your life, be kind.
Stay safe.
And happy reading. Ave Caesar.